everyone, and welcome to the Bristol 24/7 Queer Catch-Up. My name is Kit, and my pronouns are they, them, and theirs.
My name is Lowie, and my pronouns are they, them, and theirs.
We're going to be diving headfirst into some of the biggest queer stories, but first, here's the rundown. Five senior members of Pride in London, including the two co-chairs, have resigned after accounts emerged surrounding bullying and racism. The organisation has faced immense criticism from groups including Stonewall about a culture of racist attitudes and the bullying of whistleblowers. A lesbian couple were forced to hide in the back office of a Tesco after 3 women hurled homophobic abuse at them while they shopped. Kent police have released CCTV footage of the suspects and are investigating the incident as a hate crime. A study from the National Union of Journalists has revealed that a third of LGBTQ+ journalists working in the UK have experienced discrimination as a result of their queer identity. Additionally, almost 2/3 of queer journalists do not believe that the media represents queer people fairly and accurately. And finally, the government has announced a £23.4 million funding injection to ensure that pre-exposure prophylaxis drugs for HIV, often known as PrEP, will be widely available across the UK. HIV charities have welcomed the move, but caution that care should be taken to ensure that the rollout is combined with awareness schemes to increase uptake. That's the rundown. You're up to date. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 4. It's really awesome to be back once again. We got a really good response to our chat with Jack last week, and that was really, really lovely. Very grateful, very glad that we got to do that.
Yeah, it was so lovely to speak to Jack, and we got some amazing guests this week as well. And it's just all very exciting. And episode 4! Episode 4!
I know, I mean, it seems that people are really responding to it, and I'm just really grateful that people want to engage with this and want to join in. Actually, one thing that I'm going to put out on Twitter as well, we've got a lot of guests lined up and things, but at the moment, just by the way things have sort of fallen out, the majority of the guests that we've had and have lined up are white, and we want to make sure we're platforming all queer voices. So if you know anyone who's a person of colour who is doing queer work, doing queer projects in and around Bristol and might be interested in coming on the podcast, ping them our way, because we really want to make sure that we're platforming everyone.
Indeed, indeed.
Before we properly dive into our stories, there is one thing we need to touch on briefly. So, at time of recording, it is March the 18th, and sort of within the past sort of day or so, news has come out about the University of Bristol, one of their feminist societies, behaving in a way that's quite transphobic. That's very transphobic, and kind of doubling down on that in response to people sort of calling them out on it.
Yeah, so the news that has broken in the last couple of days, we know what's been reported, but as, we want to stay integral and, fair journalists, and although, we could react to this, we think that's probably not very helpful. I'm going to be looking into it over the next week, and then hopefully by the time this podcast comes out, we'll be able to sort of link to some more information that Bristol 24/7 has reported on it. But we don't want to sort of just react to it, because we just don't think that's helpful for anyone. And we want to just make sure we give you a really good and fair report on what's going on.
Yeah, even though, things that are coming out, it seems that people are behaving in a way that's awful and inexcusable in a lot of ways. For us as trans people, there is a lot of emotion tied up in this, and we want to make sure that we're not reacting purely based off emotion, because we choose these stories that we talk about on the podcast quite a few days in advance, and this is a lot more recent. We want to make sure that we research. We're all about tearing down transphobes, but we want to do it articulately, in a well-researched way and with, good journalistic integrity. So we don't want you to think we're ignoring this or glossing over the issue. Like Lowie said, hopefully, we'll be able to talk about it maybe on the next podcast. I'm sure Lowie will write something really awesome and wonderful about it. In the meantime, just so you know where we're at on this, we're on it. We will get back to you on that one.
Indeed. So the first story we're going to talk about today is going to be about a new LGBTQ plus space that could be coming to Bristol, and it's super exciting. Yeah, we're just thrilled about it. The idea of a new space in Bristol, especially for queer people. Yeah, and we spoke about it a little bit in our first episode about like how we need more queer spaces, and now that we might actually get a really inclusive, wonderful space, is super exciting. I'm really chuffed about it.
Yeah, I think it will be really, really cool to have somewhere that's kind of a central hub for queer stuff happening in Bristol. Because in other cities, in Birmingham, for example, there's this big space right smack bang in the city centre that is Birmingham LGBTQ Centre, and obviously pre-pandemic, you'd have groups there, like board game groups, and it was just sort of a space, like a central hub for these things. Whereas in Bristol at the moment, a lot of things are quite sort of spread about.
Yeah, that's what I always find is quite disparate. Like there's not, I think we spoke about this before, but like Old Market seems to be seen as the LGBTQ plus area, but like even within Old Market, it's not like, it doesn't feel like there's a hub. It feels like you have a few odd venues that are like queer friendly or explicitly queer. Yeah, there isn't like, you go here, like you may be in Manchester with your gay village, you go to the gay village to do XYZ. Like here, it's like,
Birmingham again.
I mean, yeah, like you have your clubs which are in a slightly different area to like the Bear Bar, and then you have like, I don't know, groups that aren't even in like explicitly queer spaces, they, because of, funding issues and whatever, like they're in spaces that aren't necessarily explicitly queer. So yeah, I think to have a space that is by and for queer people, I hope it will become a hub. It sounds like that's what their people behind it want it to become. And they're working to make sure it's something that like doesn't already exist, which I think is super important, and it's something that people in Bristol want. So yeah.
Because this project is very much in kind of the early planning stages right now. They're considering launching a crowdfunder and trying to find a space and things, and this group really seems to be really into like taking in feedback. So yeah, I guess it would be a cool opportunity to talk about like what we would want from like our dream kind of queer space, in the perfect ideal world. Yes, what we would want.
Yeah, I think we've done enough moaning about it, we'll do some imagining about what, like, I mean, I hope that this space is all of these things, but like, this like dreamy, accessible, affordable, like just inclusive space. That's what I just hope that this is what that's going to be. Let's talk about what we want. What we want in a space. Tell me what you want in a space.
I mean, you touched on accessible, and I think that's a really important thing, because the nature of a lot of buildings in Bristol in general, just because Bristol has so many gorgeous, beautiful old buildings, is that for people with certain mobility kind of needs, in terms of people who use mobility aids and people who use wheelchairs and things like that, it can be really difficult to access a lot of buildings. So I think accessible for people who experience the world in all sorts of ways. We touched on with Jack last week sort of the quite sizable overlap between queer people in the autistic community, of which I sit proudly in the middle of that Venn diagram. You can't tell.
Love a Venn diagram. Love a Venn diagram.
I big time love a Venn diagram. So I think providing sort of things for that, and
yeah, and I think that like being very widely open about like what accessibility means, and just like I think it's so easy to be like, oh, accessibility means people that have like who might use a mobility aid not be able to use stairs. Like accessibility is so much more than that. So actually making sure like not to use just like so many buzzwords in one sentence, but like accessibility is inclusive of everyone, and it's not just what you might see represented in mainstream media. And like also like, and when people say I want a space to be diverse, and not just that being one sort of picture of diversity, making sure that you have religious diversity, the colour of people's skin is diverse, you have neurodivergent people, and that your space in this imaginary dream space I'm thinking of is diverse in all of those ways, and not just the ways that are visibly very easy to be almost performative in diversity. Like, that it's inherently, like, it's not performative, it's inherently inclusive and diverse.
Talking about, accessibility in a much, much broader sense, I think in terms of location, where it is quite important in that, because, Bristol is, quite a large city, quite like a spread out city, and I think it needs to be in a location that is easy for people to get to. If people don't drive, where there's good sort of public transport links, where there's, good public transport links, close by parking and things like that, again, for people who might use like mobility aids and things like that. Yeah, putting it in a place that is easy to get to in, like, within sort of the city, I think is something that is quite important in that.
And I think it goes back almost to, like, the sort of the buildings that are in Bristol. I think generally, like, the infrastructure within Bristol is just really challenging because, it is a city of neighbourhoods, and also, like, the transport links aren't great. It's not easy to get several buses across the city. I know, obviously, there's plans to change that. There's always plans to change it. Yeah, like, it's really difficult. It's massively different if you wanted to go to the harbour side versus if you want to go to, like, Cabot Circus, or if you want to go to Uni of Bristol. Like, those are very different places to get to, and it can be several journeys to get there. Yeah, I'm always in two minds because I come from a very rural place, and I had one bus that used to cost like £7 return to go to town, which was like a 20-minute journey away. So I'm always in two minds because I'm like, now I live in a city, I have so many buses, but also for a city they are quite bad.
Oh yeah.
Like, it's not exactly like easy to get around in Bristol.
So one of the things that I read somewhere online when I first came to Bristol was about the two major bus companies. One will leave you broke, the other will leave you stranded. And that's
that hits close, but
that is proven true.
Yeah, and then, like, even with, I don't know, like, you think about, like, the railways, they're all really awkward places as well. Not all of them. The ones in East Bristol are a little bit better, but, like, the one in Bedminster isn't, I don't know, it's not near, like, East Street or West Street, particularly.
Yeah.
I don't know, like, I mean, they are, but, like, you still have to, like, walk. I don't know, like, it's just really, it's not an easy city to get around, and not an easy city to build, like, or, like, repurpose buildings into something really, like, modern and accessible, and, like, there are a lot of buildings with a lot of stairs and a lot of wiggly roads. Like,
well, I mean, the thing that jumps to mind as well is, like, Park Street.
Oh,
like,
gosh, yeah.
Good lord. I forget where it was. I think it was somewhere in Totterdown. That's been named, like, the steepest street in the country.
Yeah.
Like,
Vale Street, I think it's called, where they do the egg rolling every Easter.
Oh, did not know about that.
Yeah, they do egg rolling. It's a tradition. Everyone comes out from their houses and chucks eggs down the hill. I mean, I haven't been, but I can only imagine there's quite a big, like, clean-up task.
Yeah, like, that's got to be... God, I mean...
I think the opposite of my queer dream space is somewhere with lots of stairs on Vale Street.
Yeah.
As long as it's not in Vale Street, well, I mean, I'll take that.
I think as well, it would be cool to have, and again, this is something they mention, spaces for people who are in recovery. Because, and also, sometimes you just don't want to drink. Sometimes you just, like, I just want to sit and have a coffee and, like, play some board games. Or...
Oh, now I'm missing cafes. You know what I'm missing specifically now you said that? The, Chance Encounters.
Oh my
and
god.
The Playground Cafe.
God, oh. I have the most love for Chance Encounters, like, the most love. When my partner and I were getting together, we spent a lot of our time in there. So a lot of happy memories.
Yeah, shout out to this group. I think you should get some, like, even if they're really old, like, and they might have some bits missing, I reckon pop some board games in there. And even if it's like you have, like, those urns of hot water, just have that.
Yeah.
With, like, coffee to go, I'm happy. Like, any queer space, if they add that, I'm sold.
This is the thing, just, like, I think having sort of organised groups is a really, really cool thing, but also having somewhere where you can just, like, drop in and you might see someone you know, or there might be, you know, someone who's just like maybe sort of like a peer support practitioner or something, who's just kind of around in the space. You can kind of just having a bit more of a drop-in kind of feel, as well as, oh, there's this group at this time and this group at this time, because A, you know, people's schedules are different, and B, like, having somewhere where it's just, oh, a place you go where there's, you know, there's nice squishy sofas, and there's nice squishy sofas, and you can have a cup of tea, you know, and know that people aren't going to misgender you, and sometimes that's just what you want.
Yeah, like, I think it kind of touches on what we said in our first episode, which was that there's a lot of places, the places that we do have in Bristol, that are very focused around clubbing and drinking, or they're focused around mental health support. And both those things are, you know, wonderful. But it's nice, it would be nice to have something that's not either of those things, which I think is the impression I get is what these people want to make this queer space. They want to make it something that isn't either of those things, but could act as that potentially if people wanted it to, but it's not like explicitly that. It's an inclusive space where people can just be. And yeah, that thing of like, I love, what I would love in a queer space, and what I do love about queer spaces inherently, is the fact that you can go to them and you're not queer. Like, you are queer, but like, you don't have to think about being queer.
Yeah.
Like, you can't obviously think about being queer, but like, people will just get your pronouns right.
Yeah.
No one's going to question why you're wearing like clothes that might not like match your perceived gender. Like, no one's like, being queer doesn't have to be the one thing about you. Yeah,
and this is the thing that I think, again, we touched on this like last week, saying that, you know, people are always saying to us, oh, you know, why are you, you know, always like screaming about like, you know, being queer? Well, you know, we have to, but then in spaces where we don't have to, we can just talk about other things and just sort of be in other things and just sort of, you know, and just sort of belong. And I think also, like, okay, so this is a really, really specific thing. It would be cool if there was like maybe like a session like sort of like once a week where people who are just sort of exploring sort of their gender identity and things could like come on and like try on like clothes and things. So there would be some like donated clothes that are just part of the centre in a variety of sizes, maybe sort of some binders in a range of sizes and things like that. And people who are just exploring their gender identity, people can like try on things and, you know, sort of experiment with what feels right and what feels good. Because when you're sort of coming out first, like kind of experimenting and deciding and choosing, you might feel nervous about buying something in a shop, or, you know, if you're trying to like buy, say for example, like if I'm trying to buy like a pair of trousers that's like in men's sizes, like I don't really know necessarily how that fits me. So someone who like knows how clothes, you know, sort of fit can be like, okay, you know, let me help you take your measurements and be like, okay, so this is how women's sizes work and this is how men's sizes work. This is how to bind safely, and a binder should fit. I think that would be a really cool thing to have. I know that's a really specific thing.
Yeah, like, I think it goes back to also what this space is doing and making it pay what you can, accessible and free if needed. Yeah, like, you can't always afford to buy clothes just to see if they suit you.
Yeah.
I also think people should check out Gender Swap, which is on Facebook, and they are, I think, based in the Southwest. They always come to Trans Pride in Bristol, but they give away like free binders, and they do loads of workshops. They've been doing so many at-home workshops over the pandemic about like how you can like remodel clothes you already have, or learn ways to dress in the style that suits you or that feels good for you, and like is very accessible in the sense of like, get your dad's old shirt, maybe ask for permission first, like chop the sleeves off, or like, you know, wax some patches on there. And yeah, so I would definitely recommend checking them out. But also, yes, I think even if like there isn't that, like Gender Swap should definitely be invited, because
100%, yeah, like
they are so cool.
I feel like I had heard the name, but I hadn't really come across them. But yeah, that sounds like pretty much exactly like what I'm thinking of. It would be cool if they had kind of a permanent sort of home within that sort of space. That would be really, really good. And maybe even like occasionally do like sort of like a swap shop type thing. Yes. I love those.
Love swap
Oh,
shops.
I love this. But in like an explicitly queer space where no one's going to be like, why are you picking up that? And like, oh, that's for guys, that's for girls. No, you're not going to be made to feel weird about that. Yeah. That would be a really, really awesome thing.
Yes. Oh, man. I think that at some point we will have all these spaces like this, and I hope we do. And I hope that like this space will be a step towards it. Like, obviously, we're not sitting here being like, you must tick all these boxes. These are literally just us going off and like being like, oh my god, my dream space would be like this. But like, it'd be so awesome if this place like is able to impede some of these things. And like one day, queer venues are so prevalent, and there's so many of them that you can find all these things. Oh, I dream for that day.
But what I do really appreciate, and what's really coming through sort of certainly in sort of the quotes you've got from these people, is that they are listening. And to be honest, I think that more than anything is the most important thing. And they don't want to like replicate things that already exist. That's another really important thing as well. I don't know, I'm just really glad that these people are coming out here and going, right, let's do this. Like we're out here, we're looking for funding, and we're doing all of this stuff. Yeah, I mean, in a dream world, in a real dream world, there'd be a tiny little recording studio at the top.
No pressure, guys. No pressure. No pressure. Making this, but Kit has requested specifically
recording studio,
and I would like there to be bees everywhere. Not actual bees, just like decorations of bees.
All covered in bees.
Just bees everywhere. That's my particular request. Maybe a whole hive out the back. The queer hive.
The queer hive. Maybe that's what they should call it, the queer hive.
Oh my gosh, the queer hive.
The queer hive. That's actually quite a good name. I kind of love that. Oh god.
No pressure, guys. Take me up on that one.
Yeah.
But, no, honestly, like we wish these people so much luck, and I think it's, I don't know, people. It's there's obviously a need for spaces like this. So I've got no doubt it's going to be incredible.
Hey gang, Kit here. Just so you know, we are recording this segment on a slightly different day to when we recorded the rest of what you're going to be hearing this week's podcast. We've got some really special guests coming up who I will introduce you to in just a moment. However, unfortunately, Lowie is feeling a little under the weather. Don't worry, they are absolutely fine. They just need a little bit of time to rest and take care of themselves. So it's just going to be me this week chatting to our very special guests who I am just about to introduce you to. So I am delighted to have Bernie and Tom with me here today. If you guys could just tell everyone who you are and what it is you guys do.
Hi, I'm Bernie, he, him. And I am the co-presenter and producer of queer podcast, What That Old Queen. And I'm also an actor, voice artist and audio producer at other times.
Hi, my name is Tom Marshman, and I use he, him pronouns. And I'm the co-host of What That Old Queen, the podcast. And when I'm not doing that, I'm a performer and theatre maker based in Bristol.
Awesome, guys. Awesome. I mean, just having another queer podcast around is always a really awesome thing. I mean, the more the merrier in terms of queerness, I always think. So for people who haven't come across your podcast before, could you just explain a little bit about what it's about, what you guys do with it?
So I think it's a light-hearted look at queer life of a certain age. So me and Bernie are similar ages, being, well, the wrong side of 45, shall I say. And I guess we record of an evening, so it sort of has the sort of feel of a bit of a kind of down the pub kind of vibe, really. Very chitty-chatty, light-hearted, irreverent, and we have a little agony art section. We don't take ourselves too seriously, I suppose.
Yeah, I think a lot of our listeners have liked it during lockdown. God, I wish it was pop down.
Oh.
They've liked it during lockdown because I think it reminds them of going out a bit to the pub and having a chat with their friends. And one of the reasons why we started it was to kind of bridge the gap between older and younger members of our community, of our queer community, and to realize that a lot of the issues that we have as older people and younger people are probably the same. And we deal with some quite serious issues, but also some light-hearted ones. And we have features on kinks, queer history, and all sorts of things, whatever I can lay my hands on that week.
And Kit, I was listening to your podcast, episode 2, and you were saying, I wonder what it's like for queer people of your parents' generation. And I probably think, well, that's probably us.
Yeah, you should listen to our podcast and realise how disgracefully we're growing old.
I mean, I think that's the thing. I think it's really great that you guys are doing what you're doing because yeah, so many people are talking about the younger queer experience, and I think what you guys are doing is relatively unique in that you are putting out into the world, explaining and talking about the older queer experience.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we just need a breadth of experience, really, that we can all find our own stories within.
I think we're kind of like the first generation that has access to all of this technology in order for us to do this. But also we had a bit of a lost generation with the HIV and AIDS pandemic.
Yeah.
So I think in some respects, we may have lost that in the queer community of having those older members of the queer community and realizing that some of the experiences that you're going through now are similar to things that we went through in the past. There's obviously different issues now, and I don't say there isn't, but it's also to make our community and older members of that community sympathetic to that as well.
Yeah, I think that is a really important thing. Just a little moment ago, actually, before we sort of started this section of the recording, you started talking about sort of unique spiritual kind of practices, and that kind of intrigued me. Could you kind of explain more about that?
Me and Bernie are always interested in things like tarot card readings or visits to to psychics and that kind of thing, with a kind of curiosity and a sense of humor around it. And often that we might sort of linger over some of those practices for a while. And I guess it's quite intersectional, really, in the way that we talk about things. So they might involve kinky sex, or they might involve a historical figure in queer history. Yeah, so we had some tarot card reading live on our podcast, didn't we, Bernie?
We did, and we also had medium, is it Ryan Matthews?
Yeah.
He was one of our first guests on the podcast. And that was really interesting. I mean, my family are spiritualists, so I come from a long line of that belief. But we did a program, like a Halloween special, and I was looking into different practices and how the queer world links itself to horror movies and witchcraft and things like that. And a lot of trans people are finding solace in the Wicca movement, and they're finding a place in that. And I think that's brilliant because they're finding some kind of home and spiritual awareness through that.
Yeah.
Not to get too churchy or spiritual on you.
No, not at all. I mean, I think anything that kind of helps people feel more connected to themselves and to the world around them is a positive thing. I think as long as you're, I guess, gentle with it in the way you approach others with it. But,
welcome to being indoctrinated into the Church of What That Old Queen.
But I mean, it's actually interesting in terms of spiritual practices. And I mean, talking about, I guess, what you'd call more mainstream sort of spiritual practices. Sort of friend of mine is quite a prominent trans poet. And quite recently, he's been talking more about sort of his faith, and kind of really he's been connecting with sort of his Christianity and things. And I think, especially in the wake of sort of recent news about, in the way that the Catholic Church has decided we can't bless.
Oh yes, the same-sex union thing.
Yeah, which is
a
complete U-turn.
I tweeted about that. Well, it's kind of like, how is love a sin that is not the doctrine of the Christian church.
Exactly.
It preaches love. So if you're going to not bless a loving union, then what is your church all about? I don't know.
And this thing,
anyway,
like,
that's quite controversial for us.
but
I think all religions at their heart have acceptance and love in, and I think that's one of the reasons. So this article that I was quoting on the podcast was that I think they were mainly American people, but they were trans people. And because they were finding the church not accepting of them, they found solace and an ability to be spiritual by looking at Wicca and witchcraft. And they found an acceptance there, which they don't tend to find in conventional churches.
I think partly why me and Bernie are drawn to it as well is the kind of innate theatricality and sense of ritual around it as well, which is just appealing for us as performers.
I think ritual is a really important thing and a very calming thing for anyone, really. Anything that makes you feel, connected and grounded, particularly just in the way the world is generally these days. There's actually a sort of quote sort of thing that I came across that I'm going to loosely quote because I can't remember exactly, but I feel like you guys would appreciate it. It was from this book basically saying that God, made me trans for the same reason that he made fruit but not wine, and wheat but not bread, so that humanity could share in the act of creation.
I love that.
Like I said, I personally, I'm not a particularly religious person. I'm not, but that quote always sticks with me. Like, that is probably why a lot of queer people are drawn to these things. And
but I hasten to add, we only do 1 or 2 programs like this. We've had 40 episodes and probably dedicated 2 to this. So there's lots of other things we talk about.
yeah. It's sorry if I'm going on about it too much, but it's quite an interesting thing that I hadn't really explored before.
No, but that's another thing why we do so many different subjects on the podcast, because it's just it's a broad overview of queer life, really, and what queer people are interested in. The only thing we don't seem to touch on, Tom, is sport, isn't it? But I'm not a massive sport fan, and I don't think you are either, are you?
No, never really been into sport. Always the last one to be chosen in the team.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, me too.
Well, there we go.
Yeah, and we talk about, we talked a lot about It's a Sin. We talk about the drag race, all those things that people want to talk about, and we have different viewpoints on it.
Yeah, we've had some amazing guests.
Oh yeah.
Scott Capurro recently, Simon Casson from co-founder of Ducky was on last episode. Who else have we had, Tom?
We've had I can't remember any of them now. Do you know, the whole lockdown has just been a way that I've forgotten my memory.
Oh, we had Neil Bartlett, Sue Tilley, David Mills, Edson Burton, Joe Bannon, Joey Haitley, the Gender Joker, and all sorts. I think we started having guests from season 2, so we've got about 30 different episodes with different guests.
Oh, wow. I think one thing that I kind of wanted to sort of chat to you guys about is that I think podcasting is such a good format for very, very niche things, and for bringing quite niche things sort of towards kind of the mainstream, because there is like a reasonably low kind of barrier to entry.
It's accessible.
It's accessible, and also very easy to, to share it, to get it out there. And I think that's quite a good thing, like, for the queer community, because there are so many different, aspects and experiences within that, people with different gender identities, different, sexualities, kink, as you sort of spoke about, and, different sort of age groups within that, different racial groups, people with disabilities and things like that. I think it's a really good sort of space for sort of bringing very sort of niche and underrepresented things to the mainstream, I think.
Totally. I think it's made genres more democratic, because we're not at the mercy of BBC or independent local radio programmer as we were when I was a kid. You had to rely on what they would program. Queer TV shows and radio shows were very few and far between, and the whole thing that we can now create our own content and get it out there means that we can have this diversification of subjects and broadcast media that we can all enjoy, and it can be as niche as you like. Sometimes it's even better to be really niche, because then you're going to get that whole audience there.
It's interesting what you say though about, TV shows, we're subject to what they want to program. Well, I'm part of a online community where we meet every morning at 9 a.m. and someone does a 10-minute assembly for us. And someone presented today a cartoon that was quite heavily featured right at the beginning of Channel 4 in the 80s. And Channel 4, when it started, it was just quite queer, wasn't it, Bernie? And it was unruly and chaotic, and Divine David was on, or like all different things happened, and slowly that has just become.
It's been eaten away, hasn't it? And I think the problem with it now is that a program like Drag Race is so big, and it's brilliant that that's there. When we were kids, that would never even be on mainstream TV. But I think what the programmers think now is that they've ticked that box, and now they don't have to do anything else.
Yeah.
And it's created a vacuum for any other kind of queer programming that could go on. I remember those days of the little pink triangle, Tom. Do you remember that in the 1980s? The pink triangle, I remember as a teenager, because I didn't come out to my parents until till I was 30. But I remember as a teenager watching on my little black and white television in my bedroom with my headphones in, watching these queer movies and thinking, oh gosh, that's what I want to be when I grow up.
So the pink triangle, the pink triangle was a kind of signal that there was going to be some queer content on screen.
Oh, okay, so it was kind of like a.
Yeah, it was
I don't know, like a content warning for queerness.
Well, yeah, it's sort of excitement, celebration. Let's get started.
Maybe we need to incorporate that into our logo.
I mean, you mentioned Channel 4, actually. That just reminded me. Do you remember a few years ago when there was the Winter Olympics were happening in Sochi in Russia? Obviously, Russia, deeply homophobic state. And Channel 4 were doing the coverage of the Winter Olympics, and they put out this song called it was called Gay Mountain. And it was this gay mountain, good luck, gaze on gay mountain. Basically, I do remember that being, to me, it seemed quite ballsy, at the time,
yes.
Certainly. But
and totally. And that's another thing that brings me back to podcasting, is because our podcast has touched every single continent apart from Antarctica, but there are some ones which I don't know. So if anyone from Antarctica is listening and you have listened to our podcast, get in contact. But even in countries where it's illegal and you can get the death sentence for being gay, our podcast has been listened to. And that's what I love about it. It can touch people when they're in such repressed regimes. And we're really lucky in the UK. I mean, it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but we're very lucky in terms of what's happening in other countries. And that's another reason for us doing this podcast. It's to touch people and let them know that, you know, other queer people are out there. That regime which is suppressing you, hopefully uplifts them to know that other people are out there, and hopefully, because we're out here and progressing our movement, hopefully it's touching some of the people in charge at home, and it will get easier for them. But it's been difficult in this country, and it's changed so much, even in our lifetimes, hasn't it, Tommy?
I was just thinking about the audio form generally, not just podcasts, but radio, and how it's such an intimate form, and you can feel like you're communicating directly to someone. And when I've done a lot of work with LGBTQ plus histories, I've always spoken to, quite often, queer older men who tell me about the significance of Round the Horn with Kenneth Williams, which he used, Polari, the secret gay language, and how it was a seminal moment for them hearing that.
It's just a way to connect all over the world, and that's brilliant.
I think you're definitely right about the audio form and the intimacy of the audio form. I think that's something that I've always that's what's drawn me to making documentaries and making radio documentaries and making podcasts, because it does feel like you're just sitting in listening to pals having a conversation. That's kind of what I hope with this podcast, that people feel they're listening to just
that's how it felt like to me when I was listening to it.
Oh, I'm glad because that's,
and we've had a lot of similar feedback as well, and I think that's really good to get that natural feel, and it's very easy to listen to then.
I think so. And I think that's something that can be achieved with, certainly with audio in a way that you kind of can't necessarily with certain visual mediums, although I think people do find that to a certain extent with YouTubers. But I also think with podcasting, in comparison to radio, particularly sort of mainstream, particularly sort of the BBC and things like that kind of radio, I think where it's more kind of naturalistic, more kind of in that.
Also, you're not restricted in any kind of censorship, and so we talk about everything. We talk about sex, and we swear, and we don't have any restrictions like that, and that's what I love. It's very liberating. It's really liberating to say whatever you want on a podcast, instead of having to follow a script. So although we do script it, but in the loosest possible terms.
Yeah, it's nice knowing that you have that total editorial kind of control, and that you can just go, hey, I want to talk about something that's really important to me. That is something that's nice, I guess, just in independent art in general. I think that's something that the internet has been really, really good about in terms of getting things out there. Of course, there's the flip side of that, where it does make it easier for certain groups of people to spread
hate.
Hate. Let's not sugarcoat it. It has made it easier for people to spread hate, but it's made it a lot easier for people to spread joy and spread love.
Let's hope we're spreading a bit of love.
That's definitely what
it's definitely our remit, I think, to spread some love and diminish hate wherever we can.
This seems like quite a good place to actually kind of wrap up, I think. Could you guys tell people how to find you? Just let people know how to get a hold of your stuff.
We're on every single podcast platform imaginable, including YouTube. And we have our own website, thatoldqueen.com, as well.
Delightful. Well, thank you so much, guys, for coming on and having a little chat to me today. And everyone, please go and listen to their stuff, because we want to support queer people doing awesome queer things and putting out joy and love into the world. Thank you so much, Tom and Bernie.
Thank you, Kit, for having us.
And good luck.
Great.
Good luck with the rest of the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. So, story number 2 that we're talking about this week. Lowie has written something really, really wonderful. I know I always say this, but like I just like telling Lowie they're wonderful.
Thanks.
About Fat Bristol, PHAT Bristol. They're this sort of a kind of like arts collective who are really trying to, you know, show solidarity with Polish queer communities who are really struggling after, you know, Poland has declared several areas LGBT free zones, which is
pretty yikes. Yeah, the ILGA, who work across Europe, have declared Poland the most homophobic country in the EU, and I think that's more than obvious right now. And yeah, there was solidarity protests held in August with communities over there, and I think Fat Bristol are doing some like really incredible stuff and showcasing this beautiful show of solidarity between queer people in Bristol and queer people in Poland. And I think the co-founder Ola has done some incredible work putting this all together, and I just want to like definitely like platform her voice and say like some of the stuff she's been saying, because she was saying it's scary that the only reason I've had such a beautiful time coming out is because I've been in Bristol. Any of us could have been born somewhere else, and it could be us without access to contraception, sex education or human rights. It could be you who's getting arrested for hanging up a pride flag, and like I just think it's terrifying to remember, and also to think of when UK is arguably not in a great place either. But I love that Bristol is doing this in solidarity with Poland, and I just want to give all my love to people across the world in damaging, awful, horrific situations like this. And it's the reason we do this podcast. It's the reason we're loud and proud queers. It's because not everyone can be, and although we have rights in the UK, we have some rights, there are places which, like Poland, are just like either taking steps backwards or are stuck in a place where people don't have access to, you know, their human rights and equality. It kind of sucks. It sucks a lot, and it's we don't want to, I guess don't want to just bring it down a downer, but like it's really it's always difficult to know your queer family is suffering, and especially when it's so cutely brought up in ways like this, and thinking like, oh my god, only over 50 places in Poland have been like labelled as LGBT plus free. It's so ridiculous.
And the thing is as well, and I think these kind of like solidarity things are really, really important. I mean, the album that they're releasing is going to be called Poland Has a Task. That's going to be raising money for 3 different Polish charities, which are, you know, trying to help various sort of things. One which is trying to offer safe abortions abroad. One which is, quote, a charity of empowered and livid young queers who are relentlessly fighting for gay rights. Empowered and livid, I love as a quote. As just like a tagline, I just love. And there's a third charity that's trying to fight to get abortion rights back for people in Poland. So you know, raising money for these charities, awesome. But also, I think these shows of solidarity from abroad are really, really important, just because it gives people, you know, the energy to resist, the energy to fight, the energy to stand up to things, or even just the energy to just know that, like, okay, my government may be saying this about me, but they are not the only people speaking, and they do not have to be right about this.
Yeah, and like that energy to keep going and to feel like there is family like surrounding you, even when you might not be able to explicitly, you know, be queer, be with your queer family openly in your country. Just knowing, like, and I hope Polish communities know that there's so many people who are rooting for them and know how much this sucks, because it wasn't long ago that the UK was very similar, and although we don't have memories of that massively, like obviously I can remember Section 28, and I can remember, you know, all the homophobia and transphobia that we get through every day, but like, you know, physically our government was not too different not very long ago. And Yeah, it sucks to know that other queer people are having to suffer, but I hope they know.
Sort of on this note, the European Parliament has declared the entire of the EU as a, quote, LGBTIQ. That's weird. Normally those last two letters are the other way around. Normally it's QI and then plus and whatever.
I keep seeing it the other way around recently. I don't know. There's so many fucking acronyms.
If anyone knows why those last two letters get swapped, like, occasionally, like, if there is a particular reason about that, like, please tweet us, because I am curious. I don't know if it's just people doing it in different ways. Anyway, LGBTQ plus freedom zone has declared the whole of the EU to be this freedom zone. Kind of in response to this, but so the problems come where is that just a gesture? It's is that kind of just a gesture? Like, what is that actually going to mean on the ground level? It's saying that authorities at all levels of governance across the EU should protect and promote equality and the fundamental rights of all, including LGBTQ. I'm just going to keep saying QI because, like, I just read it as that way in my head. LGBTQI persons. Someone a German MP has said, let's use it, let's put it into concrete political action. Better laws, better enforcement, better protection. Yeah, so this needs to go into something concrete, right?
Yeah.
But the other issue, when you look at it, is, and this is something that a lot of people felt in a similar way kind of after the American election. So this resolution was supported by 492 MEPs, but 141 voted against it and 46 abstained.
Oh my god.
And, so knowing that there are still people that are, like, actively voting against this, it's...
Yeah, it's disheartening.
Disheartening is the word. You're right. Like, disheartening is 100% the word. But I worry that things like this are quite sort of tokenistic. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is great that the European Parliament is saying, like, we want to support queer people. It's like, great, cool, you've said that.
Now do it.
Do something about it. Like,
yeah.
That's sort of the problem.
Yeah, man. I know, and I'm just angry. Like, a livid queer, that's what I am. But also, I think it's worth keeping an eye out that Fat Bristol are going to be hosting a protest at some point in April, probably. And it will start at the Polish Roman Catholic Church of Our Lady Ostrobrama on Cheltenham Road, and then head to College Green. But there's also going to be, like, discussions, speeches and information held online. So if white people are not comfortable going in person, especially after all the laws that are happening at the moment.
Good Lord, yeah, that's a whole other thing we haven't discussed. And to be honest, like, I am still trying to pass and process these laws. People I did see a tweet this morning that really, like, stuck with me about that, saying, stop talking about, we're on the road to fascism. We're already there.
Yeah.
Was it you that, like, put that on Instagram? Maybe it was.
It may have been me. But yeah, I think not only do we need to show solidarity with people in other countries, I think we need to keep fighting for everything that the UK has achieved and everything that some political parties, naming no names, are trying to roll back and turn this country into something that I don't think is good for anyone.
And the thing about it is it's obviously this isn't the major reason why, but frankly I sort of feel like what I'm about to say is probably one of the only ways that you would potentially get through to the kinds of people that are running our country right now. If you keep putting restrictions on and not respecting the rights of queer and trans people, you're going to lose talented queer and trans people, because, like, do you even want to know the amount of time I've spent on the New Zealand immigration website? Like, like, genuinely, you're going to lose very talented people because people who are able to afford to are going to be like, well, I'm going to move to another country that does respect my rights and that does, view me as valuable as a human being. Like...
Yeah, like, we're not asking for much. We're just asking for a decent government, a decent country to live in that respects us. And I think, oh man, it's just so much going on. And obviously, like we said at the beginning, we're recording this on the 18th of March. So by the time this comes out, who knows what will have happened. But, man. Yeah, keep fighting. Keep being an empowered and livid queer. Yeah,
this is the thing. We need to keep fighting the good fight. But I think the things that, like, Fat Bristol are doing are really, really awesome, and I think showing solidarity with people who are unable to make their voices heard out of fear of being persecuted and arrested and all sorts of things. I think showing that, shouting out that, we love and support you. I think especially in the wake of Brexit, actually, when we're talking about, like, EU countries, I think showing our support for saying, for this, basically saying, like, even though a proportion of our country voted to leave the EU in a move that was several different levels of, but again, let's not go into that right now. Saying that, we still care, we still love you, we still care about your rights, and we still, want to do things. And again, the fact that they're, raising money for these 3 pilot charities that are doing really, really awesome things. Have they said when in April they're going to be doing this protest?
No, because they had to reschedule it because of lockdown shenanigans. If I do find out, there'll be an article.
And to anyone, particularly anyone sort of in Bristol, or anyone listening to this who is part of, the Polish community, maybe has Polish ancestry, all of these things, or, loves someone from the Polish community, and is seeing these things and is hurt by everything that's going on, like, we're just sending you our love in the biggest way, and, know that you have queer family in Bristol, in the UK, that value you for exactly who you are.
Yeah. And to anyone in Bristol or beyond, who's, it's an increasingly difficult time. I keep thinking nothing else is going to keep coming, and it does.
Yeah.
So just hang in there. Hang in there. Yeah. Your queer family loves you.
Your queer family does love you. I feel like hang in there is sometimes the best we can do, but you know what? Sometimes that's enough.
Yep, that's enough right now, I think.
We love you. So thanks so much for listening to us once again, letting us just sort of chat at you for a little bit. My name is Kit Million Ross.
My name's Lowe Trevina.
And we hope to see you in a fortnight. And big love.
Yeah, big love. Stay safe. See you soon.